infused with you. Oh, I don't know what to do. Just one kiss, just one kiss for once. I just wanna live, 'cause right here, right now, I'm holding on. 'Cause right here, right now, is where I belong. Blood's infused with you. Oh, I don't know what to do. I breathe your air, you're in my lungs. I need to fool my heart for once. I know our days are counted, walking towards the end. Look deep into my eyes and remember I'm your friend.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Sarkis. I'm an author and psychotherapist based in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm doing this video for Attitude, which is a resource for children and adults with ADHD. And my video is about how ADHD looks different in women. And I'm doing this video for AttitudeMag.com, and my website is stephaniesarkis.com. So I hear a lot from women patients and clients that they wonder why their ADHD wasn't caught until they were older. There may be a few reasons for this. One is that we're kind of socially conditioned as women to be quieter when we're little in the classroom, so we don't present as much of a behavior issue. So girls with ADHD tend to be a little quieter, may stay kind of in the back of the classroom, and because they don't cause behavior problems, they aren't really kind of picked out to get an evaluation or get a treatment or a diagnosis because they aren't really creating problems in the classroom. Usually what happens is as you go to college, start going on the workforce, start raising a family, you may find that your focus just, you're not working your potential, and you seem really overwhelmed easily, and you find out that you're more overwhelmed than your friends. So that's usually when women go in and get evaluated to see if they have ADHD. And there may be some brain structure differences between men and women in regards to ADHD. There may also be some genetic variations between men and women. And you may find too that you still just aren't as hyperactive or impulsive as the men with ADHD that you know. You may be more inattentive, more likely to lose things, distracted, and you may also find that your scheduling, you tend to overschedule yourself. So I think one of the important things is to really prioritize and figure out what in your schedule do you feel like you really need to do in your life, and what are the things that aren't as important. So I think it's also important just to know to say no. So if someone asks you, hey, we need you to be involved in this project or join this organization, sometimes you just have to say no because your schedule just doesn't permit it. And I think it's really important to take care of yourself. I think that we get really involved in taking care of other people, our families, other people in our lives, and we don't take as much care of ourselves. So I think it's really important to take time for yourself. Because if you take care of yourself well, then you'll take care of your family better too. So I think that's just really important, that to practice good self-care when you're a woman with ADHD. And also, even though you were diagnosed later, that's okay. The important thing is that you do know now that ADHD is an issue, and now you can seek treatment. So I'm Dr. Stephanie Sarkis. I'm an author and psychotherapist based in Boca Raton, Florida. This video is for Attitude, which is a resource for children and adults with ADHD. And this video is for attitudemag.com, and my website is stephaniesarkis.com.
And intelligence. For people who don't have a condition like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, it can sometimes be difficult for them to separate the condition itself from the ADHD individual's intelligence. It is often true, though certainly not a hard and fast rule, that people with a high IQ have longer attention spans and learn more easily. Therefore, it might seem to follow that people with ADHD must have a lower IQ, or that those with a high IQ can't have ADHD. As it turns out, this is simply not the case. Under the wrong circumstances, gifted, high IQ children without ADHD can have difficulty concentrating, poor performance, and apathy. This is a matter of boredom and lack of interest in the subject. For someone with ADHD, this problem is exacerbated. An ADHD individual with average intelligence may require a higher threshold for stimulation than the non-ADHD kids in order to stay engaged with a school lesson. But an ADHD individual with a high IQ will require an even higher threshold for stimulation. The measure of intelligence is something that should be considered completely separately from the capacity for high executive function. About 3 out of 4 ADHD individuals with an IQ higher than 120, which places them in the top 9% of individuals in the United States, shows significant impairments in memory and cognitive function when compared with people with similar IQs who do not suffer from the disorder, according to researchers of a Yale study. Again, this does not imply that they are stupid, because intelligence is only partially related to the areas of memory and cognition. Rather, it demonstrates that they have a greater difficulty staying on task and focusing on one subject for an extended period of time. The prefrontal cortex is the area in the brain that orchestrates planning, organization, sequencing, and judgment of consequences. ADHD impairs this, thereby making it more difficult to concentrate, to pay attention, to listen, to remember, and to learn. One term to describe these important functions is self-management. For those without ADHD, managing thoughts and thinking about things they have to do is relatively routine. They can manage their own actions and make plans on the fly without too much difficulty. It is with this that an ADHD individual often suffers. Think of the problem with this perspective. A non-ADHD individual is like an automobile navigation system with a destination in mind. Even with several possible routes to consider, executive function takes over and helps make a quick decision about the best route to take. For an ADHD mind, this problem can be much more challenging to resolve, particularly for the ones who have a high IQ. They very well might have an excessive number of ideas in their head, but difficulty taking these ideas and translating them into a plan of action. In other words, if a navigation system had ADHD, instead of rapidly analyzing, planning, prioritizing, and then choosing one of the routes, it would merely shut down because of a sense of perceived boredom with the task at hand. You might also think of the problem as a physical to-do list. The more intelligent an ADHD individual is, the longer that to-do list is, because their mind is sharper and better able to think of items to put down, but that still doesn't enable someone with impaired executive function to organize and prioritize the items on that list. The standard for what a highly intelligent ADHD individual finds interesting actually increases, while their ability to focus on things that lack their interest is comparable to those ADHD individuals possessing a lower IQ. It is for this reason that many ADHD individuals find it necessary to seek treatment. Call ADHD Specialist at 1-888-311-ADHD and schedule your appointment to get your ADHD under control. Communication problems. If you know someone who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, you've probably experienced a peculiar conversation oddity. They sometimes start saying words in the middle of a thought instead of at the beginning. This leads to disjointed and unexpected points in a conversation. What's important to realize is that they are not crazy or delusional. Their mind is actually racing, and sometimes their spoken words don't keep up with the thoughts in their head. So, in practice, they are thinking of a thought, and the sentence is started in their head, but only part way through do audible words actually reflect what they're thinking. That can make it appear as though they are talking in the middle of a sentence. As disconcerting as this is, it's merely a common result of an ADHD symptom called impulsivity. Impulsivity is a condition in which ADHD individuals cannot hold a thought in their head without speaking it aloud. For example, if an ADHD mother was in a conversation with another mother, and she suddenly realized that she needed to do laundry that day, she might blurt out, "Do the laundry." In this instance, she might have already thought, "I need to," before finishing the sentence out loud. This is merely an example, but it demonstrates how those with ADHD can have difficulty holding their thoughts to themselves. The question is, what are possible ways to keep this problem in check? First of all, anyone with ADHD must realize that this is not an easy problem to solve. Because of the condition itself, your natural inclination may be to engage in impulsivity and let your mind wander. Aside from medications, it is next to impossible to change how your mind is thinking, but there are some strategies that can help the ADHD individual carry on a conversation without outbursts or peculiarities. However, instead of looking at these as some sort of cure, think of them more as a way of tricking yourself into becoming a better conversationalist. Or if you prefer, look at them as a game that you can play and win if you follow the rules. One strategy to try is to count to 5 or 10 immediately following the end of every sentence another person speaks. This forces you to wait for the other person to finish before saying what you want to say, and it looks like you are not interrupting or blurting things out. This doesn't mean that your mind is not full of thoughts, but you are better able to control when and how you express them. You can give the appearance of slowing down when you have a conversation. If the ADHD individual is a child, there is another game to play that can teach conversation skills. Back in elementary, you might remember the teacher saying, "Raise your hand," or "Give me 5," or perhaps using a specific object that represents a student's turn to speak. For your child, designate an object as a talk rock or talk toy. This means that only the person who is holding the object is allowed to talk. Then pass the object back and forth to demonstrate the proper give and take nature of a healthy conversation. Sometimes the reason ADHD individuals blurt things out is because they are afraid of forgetting an important thought. Since memory is one issue of ADHD, This is a valid concern, but it is still a poor excuse for constantly interrupting others. To remedy this, ADHD individuals should have a notebook or small computing device handy at all times to record thoughts. This makes it so their interruptions are diverted into an acceptable place. Instead of interrupting someone else's sentence, they can simply write down what they have thought, kind of like they're in a lecture. There's another trick to keep in mind if you are apt to finish other people's sentences, thinking you know where their train of thought is heading. Wait until they have clearly finished a sentence, and then say some kind of affirmative statement like, "Okay, right, I see," or something that serves as a comfortable pause. Then take a breath. So in this conversation, as soon as the other person is done speaking a sentence, you would say something like, "Oh," breathe, and then give your response. In this way, you are contributing a comfortable flow to the conversation. Other communication problems might include changing the subject or not talking. Both of these occur when the ADHD individual's mind is wandering, often about thoughts, feelings, and worries that are completely unrelated to their current conversation topic. In these situations, it often helps to catch yourself when your mind is off on another subject and to tell yourself, "Be here now." These are some of the most common conversation problems that individuals with ADHD face every day. Sometimes medications like Adderall or Ritalin can help with issues like hyperactivity, inattention, or impulsivity, but even so, the aforementioned strategies will take you the rest of the way. Hopefully, by adopting them, you will be ready to have pleasant, comfortable conversations. Call ADHD Specialist at 1-888-311-ADHD and schedule your appointment to help get your ADHD under control. D. The common symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, are difficulty concentrating, hyperactivity, forgetfulness, and inattentiveness. Patients who are on medications like Adderall or Ritalin can generally overcome these impairments during the day, but at night it is a different story entirely. What can be managed during the day with drugs is often uncontrolled at bedtime. For a while, the American Psychiatric Association, APA, ignored sleep disturbance symptoms in ADHD patients because it subscribed to the theory that all ADHD symptoms would manifest themselves by 7 years of age. More recently, it's been found that sleep disturbances actually do show up in ADHD patients, but not until 12.5 years old on average. In addition, the symptom of insomnia is often attributed to the stimulant medications used to treat ADHD rather than the ADHD condition itself. The truth is, sleep problems are connected to ADHD. The statistics say that 15% of children with ADHD have sleep troubles, which is twice the rate found in children and adolescents who do not have ADHD. By age 12 or 13, it's estimated that more than 50% of people with ADHD will have serious difficulty sleeping. By age 30, more than 70% of ADHD patients report spending more than an hour trying to fall asleep each evening. There are some specific sleep issues that ADHD patients have to contend with from day to day. The 4 main ones are initiation insomnia, restless sleep, difficulty waking, and intrusive sleep. Initiation insomnia is a condition in which the brain won't shut off. In fact, many ADHD patients report getting a burst of energy in the evening at roughly the time when other people would be getting sleepy. This problem results in perverse sleep, that is, the desire to be awake when you're asleep and the desire to be asleep when you're awake. While not every ADHD patient suffers from this, it is one condition that can crop up. Restless sleep is essentially light, fitful sleep, which can of course be brought about by initiation insomnia. It's the kind of sleep where there's a great deal of tossing and turning, and ADHD patients will wake up to find that they don't feel sufficiently rested. Along with this is difficulty waking, which stems from the earlier problem of restless sleep. Basically, after tossing and turning until about 4 a.m., they'll fall into extremely deep sleep, so deep that they sleep through morning alarms. When they finally do wake up, they tend to feel sluggish and lethargic for the rest of the day until about the evening, when initiation insomnia starts again. One other condition that might show up is something called intrusive sleep, or if you prefer, hyperfocus. This is a condition in which ADHD patients who are awake will suddenly find themselves extremely drowsy and sometimes immediately fall asleep. This occurs when patients are disengaged from an activity. This is a sudden shift from paying attention to extreme boredom, and in non-ADHD individuals, it can be likened to a feeling of highway hypnosis. While it can be difficult to completely eliminate these issues, they can be helped by adhering to a few general guidelines. First, it is advised to avoid caffeine after 5 p.m. As a stimulant, caffeine can make most people hyper to the point where they have difficulty falling asleep on time, but an ADHD patient should be extra wary about ingesting anything that could make him or her more tired within a few hours of bedtime. The next thing to avoid is video games. Video games have their place as entertainment, but not close to bedtime. They are good at getting you excited, not calming you down. For those who are predisposed to getting more energetic at sundown, video games are likely to exacerbate the problem. Likewise, it is a good idea not to do anything strenuous or demanding. If you limit physical activity at least a few hours before bedtime, that will help a great deal. Finally, try your best to set a consistent bedtime and stick to it. One of the biggest difficulties that faces ADHD patients is the circadian rhythm disorder. In other words, it's possible for them to sleep well, but not at a typical time of day. Many sleep fine from 4 a.m. to 11 a.m., but not from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., for example. If you can adhere to a consistent bedtime, this will improve the odds of a proper circadian rhythm. Hopefully, these nuggets of wisdom can help, but either way, it is important to seek an expert in both sleep and ADHD for guidance and advice, as well as possible treatment options. There's no doubt that ADHD can make sleep challenging, but once you are armed with knowledge and strategies to compensate for it, you may be able to overcome sleep problems once and for all. Call ADHD Specialist at 1-888-311-ADHD and schedule your appointment to get your ADHD under control.
One of the reasons that ADHD is not well recognized by primary practitioners is that its validity has for many years been challenged. It's hard to believe that the first medical report about ADHD in youth was published at the beginning of the 20th century, but still at the end of the 20th century, adults and ADHD was not widely recognized. One of the reasons for this was that prominent psychiatrists held a theory called developmental delay. This theory claimed that the ADHD child's brain would catch up to the normal brain by adulthood, and hence adult ADHD didn't exist. One reason that some doctors thought that ADHD disappeared in adulthood was that some of the more disruptive symptoms did attenuate. So, for example, the hyperactive child that was running around and climbing on furniture stopped doing that. The hyperactivity turned into an internal sense of restlessness, difficulty perhaps sitting in meetings, doing things that would require being stationary for a long period of time. However, the inattentive symptoms of the ADHD child remained strong and impairing. And these symptoms, disorganization, difficulty to attend to daily tasks, these symptoms still made it very difficult for the ADHD adolescent and adult to succeed in life. ADHD adults also learn to compensate for the symptoms. So, for example, you may have an ADHD lawyer who is somewhat successful in his law practice, but he has to work twice as hard as his colleagues to get the job done. This compensation for symptoms was sometimes misinterpreted as symptoms disappearing, which was wrong. Failure to recognize the validity of adult ADHD had severe consequences. Patients were literally taken off their medication in adolescence because doctors believed the disorder had disappeared. In addition, ADHD medications were not studied in adults, and they were not FDA approved for adults. So primary care doctors who wanted to treat ADHD had a difficult time doing so because they had no approved medications. Incredibly, insurance companies would stop approving ADHD medications once the ADHD child reached adulthood. And finally, doctors were simply not trained to treat ADHD in adults. So a primary care doctor would go through their entire medical training, medical school, residency, and perhaps never see an ADHD patient and never hear about the disorder. Today, adult ADHD is accepted as an adult disorder primarily because there has been an extensive deal of scientific research studying adult ADHD from a variety of perspectives. Perhaps most importantly, in the 1980s and 1990s, follow-up studies of ADHD youth began to show that this disorder did not completely disappear. So, for example, if you were to interview 1,000 ADHD youth when they were in childhood, and then look at them again in adolescence, interview them again when they were adults, you would find that 2/3 continue to show impairing symptoms of ADHD in adulthood. So what does this mean for the adult population? We now have epidemiologic studies in the United States and in Europe that show the prevalence of ADHD in adults is about 5%. Today we estimate that about 10 million adults have ADHD but have not been diagnosed or treated for the disorder. And even more worrisome, those adults that are treated for the disorder tend to be undertreated, meaning they're treated with lower doses that are effective and typically have not used adjunctive treatments to their medical treatment. There are many other studies we could talk about that demonstrate the validity of adult ADHD. These include genetic studies that shows ADHD runs in families. If you have an ADHD child in a practice, in a pediatric practice, we know that there's about a 25% risk that one of their parents will have ADHD. We know from brain imaging studies that adults with ADHD have brain abnormalities that are similar to what we've seen in child ADHD. And finally, we know from treatment studies, any medical treatment that's been shown to work for child ADHD also works for adult ADHD. These types of research, these epidemiologic studies, these genetic studies, these imaging studies, and these treatment studies have all converged. So now in the 21st century, literally 1 century after child ADHD was first discovered, we now know that adult ADHD is a valid disorder. I'm very happy to say that today, the medical profession recognizes ADHD officially and unreservedly. The American Psychiatric Association's diagnostic manual recognizes adult ADHD as a disorder. The American Medical Association's journals regularly publish articles about adult ADHD. We no longer have difficulty publishing our articles, getting our grants funded. ADHD is recognized. It's recognized by the National Institutes of Mental Health to fund research in adult ADHD. Adult ADHD is regularly treated by many psychiatrists, and today some PCPs treat adult ADHD. We hope more PCPs will be treating adult ADHD because the need for treatment cannot be met by the adult psychiatrists that are available. And that's why we developed this educational program to train primary care practitioners about adult ADHD. We really need you to pitch in and help adults with ADHD.
Anne Cullowell, who is a Children's Rights and Complaints Officer in Newport, and we're at the Promoting Respectful Relationships Conference in Cardiff, which is all about combating bullying. And you're very much, Anne, in the front line of this. So what sort of complaints do you hear?
The kind of complaints I receive, especially in education, because that's what we're dealing with today, and specifically sexual bullying, is that usually the complaint has gone to the point where things are more extreme. Children are usually now excluding themselves from school because of the issues, relationship to the use of technology in bullying has become more prevalent, and the fact that normalisation of sexual bullying seems to be more apparent than it used to be. I mean, hands up skirts are a regular occurrence, and children, and especially girls, don't see that as something that they actually shouldn't have to take. They see it as a bit of a joke. And so those kind of issues get exacerbated and to the point where things get much worse. So I usually come in when those issues have actually got to the point where that young person is finding it so difficult to be included in the school environment. They exclude themselves, and then I usually end up coming in at that point. So I usually try and arrange an advocate for the person. I try to make sure that they are supported, to make sure that they're not seen as the victim. I try and encourage the parent to support that child and not become so emotionally attached that it causes problem for that child, and also that the child helps become part of that solving that problem. Because what happens is usually the child is sidelined, and the parent and the teachers start solving the problem without the involvement of that child. That's their choice, of course. If they don't want to be involved, I can't force them to be in that situation. but it's about the whole, and trying to encourage schools to actually look at how to recognise those issues and take an active, challenging role in them, and take them forward for other pupils within the schools. And it just doesn't mean about pupils in schools. I deal with situations in the community as well. That's much harder to handle because we're dealing with not a structure that's so in place that could actually solve things so easily. Because as we know, bullying doesn't just happen in schools. It happens on the school bus, it happens in youth centres, it happens in wherever the young people are actually.
And what sort of particular challenges does that bring out for schools or any other organisation?
I think the challenges it causes the fact that sometimes they don't communicate as well as each other amongst the staff. All staff, not just teachers, but dinner ladies, supervisors, clerical administrative staff. Sometimes the communication isn't as strong as it could be, and that's a challenge for the school to deal with. And also they don't recognise that that we have the issue of bystanders who can become more enable that peer pressure to further on, or the fact is that the bully is very good at manipulating other people to bully for them, and so we don't recognise the trends that go through the whole process.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tony Lloyd. I'm the Chief Executive here of the ADHD Foundation. The Foundation is a unique organisation in the country and certainly the largest of its kind. We provide what's called a multimodal pathway of a range of services to support families and children in order to live successfully with ADHD. ADHD is a very common neurodevelopmental condition that affects 1 in 20 children, and its core characteristics are poor concentration, impulsivity and hyperactivity, but also low emotional resilience. So these children do tend to be at greater risk of things like anxiety and depression as well. But a lot of them also have not just ADHD, but other neurodevelopmental conditions such as dyslexia or dyspraxia or autism. So often life for a child with ADHD is doubly tough because they have a number of learning disabilities that they need to deal with. But the emotional resilience is a crucial thing that many people don't quite understand about the condition. As a child and adolescent psychotherapist, I found myself over the past sort of 20 years increasingly working with young people who were presenting with a number of issues, and it seemed to me that there was an underlying issue that wasn't quite being identified, and then I began to realise that in fact it was ADHD, and increasingly a lot of the children that were referred to me either had a diagnosis or certainly had all the characteristics of ADHD. There was a eureka moment about 15 years ago when I realised that I think I had ADHD myself, and it certainly as a young man, looking back, realised that quite a lot of my youth had been made probably more challenging and more problematic because of that. So suddenly it took on a much more personal kind of meaning, and here we are. Charity has now existed for only 8 years, but a fantastic team of individuals, many of whom have ADHD themselves or have children who have ADHD. So everything that we're about really is very much driven by people who have a lived experience of ADHD and how it can impact on the lives of children and their families. My brilliant moment, I guess, was with a young boy who I met several years ago, age 5. He was one of twins. Mum and Dad approached me very concerned about Harry because he was so completely different from his twin brother, and they couldn't quite understand what it was. Talking to them and talking to Harry, I did get an idea that maybe Harry had ADHD. And certainly as the years progressed, that became much more clear. The real challenge for Harry's family was that Harry was actually quite well behaved in school. He was quite a bright little boy, so he didn't kind of fit this stereotypical image that all children with ADHD are naughty or underachieving. But what they did find was that while Harry struggled in school to do everything that he could, he was still finding himself constantly being told off for forgetting things or for fidgeting in class or for shouting out the answer when the teacher asked to put his hand up. And he would come home from school every day and just have a meltdown, be very distressed, would be crying, would be throwing his homework on the floor. So we worked with Harry's parents and encouraged them to work with Harry as if he had ADHD. So they put lots of strategies in place. Harry ended up eventually getting a diagnosis at age 10, but is actually doing extremely well, was on his school council, is now in secondary school, is really achieving academically. His behaviour is great. He still has his occasional moments where he gets distressed quite easily, which again is one of the core characteristics of ADHD, that low emotional resilience. But he's a happier child and certainly much more confident and much more optimistic. But as much as anything else, the difference that's made to his family and to his mum and dad, you know, that was inspirational really, to just see that and see the difference that it's made in their lives. And that's just one example of so many families and so many children that we work with, where the work that we do together as a foundation has made a really big difference in their lives. But Harry stands out for me.
Hi, I'm Carmel Baines, the Community Arts Manager here at the Citadel Arts Centre in St Helens, and I've been working here for 10 years. So the Citadel here in St Helens is a multifaceted arts venue. It provides a community arts programme, so that's workshops for all the community from the age of 4 up to 80 at the minute. The workshops are in drama, dance, vocals, fine art. We do DJing, we have rock band, and we have creative writing, creative arts, anything to do with the arts. We pretty much do a workshop in that. It's also a live music venue, and we receive touring theatre, and we produce in-house theatre ourselves. My brilliant moment was the day I decided to take a leap of faith and move from working in a very secure job for the local education authority and working with children who had barriers to learning to actually undertaking the community arts manager role. When I was at school, which is far too many years ago, we didn't have qualifications in drama. It was something you did as an after-school club, and I'd participated in a performance of Pygmalion, which I played Mrs. Pierce, the housekeeper, and that kind of was the catalyst for my fantastic love of drama. So whilst working for the local education authority, I was participating here at the Citadel as part of the adult theatre group, and I participated in about 3 different pantomimes. That, it just again confirmed the love of drama and working on the stage. But as I said, no qualifications, so there was no opportunity to take that forward as a career. Through participating in the adult theatre group, I developed quite a close relationship with the director of the Citadel at the time, and she approached me because a position became available to say, we would really like you to get involved as the community arts manager. And this was a massive decision. I had a very secure job and I was sort of at a crossroads, and it took me about a week to really kind of make my mind up and decide. And I was going into a job that had potentially a 2-year lifespan, with not necessarily a massive salary progression, but through using drama myself with the young people in school, I did realise how much of an impact that made on children and young people. And as my career path was working with children and young people, I decided that why not combine the two. So I did. I took that leap of faith and I handed my notice in and started a career here at the Citadel. And as I said, it's been 10 years and it's still going really well, I hope. At the minute, a high percentage of our activities are targeted at people who are experiencing particular issues within their lives. So they're harder to reach people who feel that the arts isn't for them, but that's probably down to the fact they've never participated. With young people, we're targeting young people who are at risk of antisocial behaviour, and we find that providing the workshops such as DJing and drama allows young people to spend quality time within a venue where they feel safe, can express themselves and really get some positive sense of well-being out of it. So it's just great. I think that being creative is vitally important for a lot of people, particularly those who feel a bit vulnerable or who are experiencing some difficulties, because the creative process really does open up people's communication. It allows them to feel confident, it improves their self-esteem and really does promote a fantastic sense of well-being. And people who've come through our doors and participated in various different workshops really do come back to tell us that how much they've gained from participating in our activities.
Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. The desk becomes my drum, but I don't realise until I see their eyes. It's like my hands are numb. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. My foot attacks the floor, and they turn in chairs with the coldest stares. I decide to tap no more. But within a blink, as I stop and think on how to attack the task, my pen misses my page and finds my table. Tap, tap, tap. Right, that's it. Get out of here. The teacher shouts so loud, and I shout fine like every time. I guess I'm way too proud. Sat with the head who turned and said, why couldn't you heed the warnings? Or you were asked is not to tap, tap, tap. I'll see you in the morning. Tap, tap, tap. I sat outside the office, I think, becomes my drum like that. But I don't realise, then it occurs till I see their eyes. My hand on knee, it's like my hands are numb. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. My foot attacks the floor, and they turn in chairs with the got my grades and went on to my degree, tap no more, and decided I would within a blink as reminded me of me on how to attack the task. And I remind them too. They're not that pen bad. Misses not my devil's son or daughter, and finds my table. Just a kid with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Get out of here. Tap, tap, tap. The teacher shouts so loud, and I shout fine like every time. I guess I'm way too proud. Sat with the head who turned and said, why couldn't you heed the warnings? Or you were asked is not to tap. I'll see you in the morning. And sat outside the office, I think, why did I act like that? The desk, then it becomes my drum, my hand on knee, but I don't realise until I see their eyes. It's like my hands are numb. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. But that was years ago. I got my grades and went on to my degree in chairs and decided I would work with kids that reminded me of me. But within a blink, them too, they're not that bad. On how the devil's son or daughter, my kid with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Tap, 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 tap. Right, that's it. Get out of here. The teacher shouts so loud, and I shout fine like every time. I guess I'm way too proud. Sat with the head who turned and said, why couldn't you heed the warnings? Or you were asked is not to tap. I'll see you in the morning. And sat outside the office, I think, why did I act like that? Then it occurs to me, my hand on knee is drumming. Tap, tap, tap. But that was years ago. I got my grades and went on to my degree and decided I would work with kids that reminded me of me. And I'll remind them too. They're not that bad. Not the devil's son or daughter. Just a kid with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. The desk becomes...
My blood's infused with you. Oh, I don't know what to do. I breathe your air, you're in my lungs. I need to fool my heart for once. You really should have seen it coming. Open your eyes. You're dying to pick all the pieces up. Well, I don't. You make me wanna rip my heart out. Erase my mind. We're stuck and there is no escaping now. Please don't cry. Infused with you.